Welcome to MapleWoodian.com podcast. We have on the phone Chris Nomura. How you doing, Chris?
I'm very good, Joe. Thank you very much.
Now, those of you in Maplewood and South Orange probably know Chris has been a long-time youth coach. You've coached spring baseball, summer baseball, you've been a commissioner, you've been an assistant coach, you're also the father of 3 very accomplished players, and you're also a long-time professional vocalist, opera singer, and you're going to be on Broadway this fall.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, but we'll get to that in a moment. But I did want to ask you, and I'll tell folks, just to be totally open, I've known Chris many years. He's coached my son on many teams, championship level, and learned a great deal. And Chris knows I've grilled him with many questions about it, as you're always willing to answer. But I wanted to kind of talk to you a little on here about things you and I have discussed. Mm-hmm. First of all, how long have you been coaching youth baseball?
Well, I've as you mentioned, I've been doing this a long time. It started with my oldest son, William, who started in Manhattan, and on T-ball teams.
Right, and now he's in high school at...
Right, at Seton Hall Prep. He'll be a sophomore next year, yeah. Will Nomura, and he's... so it started way back then. That was a good 10 years ago, maybe even going on 11 years. And helped Doug Sassfy's team through some really wonderful years for South Orange Maplewood. And
that's when Will was younger?
Mm-hmm. Right. That's when Will went into travel ball, starting at 8s, and then of course had the spring rec teams through his years. And then as my younger sons, Sam and Luke, came through the program, I started to become very involved in their teams, both on the spring rec level and also on the with Cole, your son,
right,
for the summer teams as well, starting at 8Us. So and now, so it's been a good 10 years, and probably I would say 4 years for both of the teams simultaneously. So it's been a lot of baseball.
Now, what did you find? Obviously, when you started in Manhattan, and then you came out here. What has been the biggest change in the way parents approach the games and kids approach? Or is there really a change? What do you see in terms of what you hear from parents, maybe good and bad, in terms of things they do well or things they should remember, when the kids are playing, what to do and what not to do?
Well, I think there have been. It depends on how. I believe it depends on how the coaches approach the team, mm-hmm. and how they deal with parents, not just during the games, but as the team is becoming organized, as the team is formed. That I think it's really important, and I say this to coaches who form their own teams, that it's important to have that level of communication with the parents. I think sometimes these teams are put together. Parents are not introduced to the coaches maybe officially. Maybe there's not an official team meeting. And I think in these team meetings it's really important for the coaches to, I think, lay down the law, quite frankly. It's important for the coaches, for the parents to understand what the coaches' roles are, not just as coaches but also as disciplinarians, and also for them to understand that they should not be involved. I believe, this is my stance on this, they should not get involved in calls from umpires. There shouldn't be any kind of shouting at umpires over certain calls or balls and strikes. I think that's a pretty basic one. But you'd be surprised, and I think you've seen over the years how involved these parents can become.
Right, and I know you and I have talked about, I think in the beginning of every season, when my son was playing for other coaches, and then for you, the same message was zero tolerance. You don't yell out at the umpire. You don't question calls. You don't. It's all, if you're going to yell out positive encouragement, that's one thing. But and it seems to take hold pretty well in South Orange and Maplewood. You tend to have a pretty good crowd of parents who pretty much follow that, or
yeah, I think so for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be the odd there's going to be the odd moment or the odd game, or even there might be, a coach here or there that might take it a little bit, take it a little far.
Right.
But again, I think for the most part, yes, I think our coaches are well aware of what the perspective is here. That we are talking about, youth baseball, and we're talking about kids wanting to be on the field and play. And I think what gets in the way sometimes is how we as adults want to impose whether it's our will or our voice, if you want to use that word, in a game. And, oftentimes we will have umpires who are also kids.
Right.
Umpiring these youth baseball games, especially the spring rec games, obviously, who are just barely 12, 13 years old. And so, to have parents or adults or adult coaches raising their voices to these young men and women, I think is incredibly intimidating. And could influence a call or two or a strike zone more than they realize. And I think we need to just stay. My feeling is we, as coaches and parents, need to just stay away from the decision makings of the game. Let the kids enjoy it. There are going to be good calls. There are going to be some bad calls, and that's just part of the game. We see it on every level. The Major League Baseball guys now have replay that they can go to. We don't have that in youth baseball.
Right.
So, a call is a call, and I try to tell all the coaches, look, whether you like the call or not, it's made. They're not going to change it. If you scream at them, it never solves anything. And
right. And these are like you said, these are kids or part timers. They're not making a lot of money.
Right.
They don't have instant replay. They're going to make mistakes, and I try to tell my son and others, look, you're going to get a bad call. That's what you go into it knowing that's the situation.
Now, occasionally there are calls that are made. It might be an infield fly rule that is called or not called, and there could be a technical aspect of the game. You could ask an umpire, I think, between innings, or maybe after a play is finished, you can calmly as possible, approach a young umpire or even a seasoned veteran umpire and just ask for their interpretation of the rule.
Right.
It might be an obstruction call. It might, let's say a defensive player, gets in the way of a runner, or vice versa. A runner gets in the way of a defensive player. Sometimes those kinds of calls can be a little questionable, and it might cost your team a run or two or an out, and you just need clarification. You need to know, maybe for future sake or for a practice, to how to instruct your players on either getting out of the way of a defensive player, or if a defensive player is blocking the path of a runner, how not to block the path of a runner, so that you don't have these kinds of instances come up in the future. And I think sometimes it is important for coaches just to call a timeout and say, can you explain that ruling to me? It might be a balk. It might be any number of things that you can teach kids in a future practice why a certain ruling went a certain way, and there is a way to do it. I understand why coaches get upset, but we do have to keep it in perspective, as I said before.
Now, you also your boys are in a travel team that's based out of South Orange and Maplewood, but you were also commissioner this last spring for one of the levels.
Yeah, I've been I have been commissioner for a couple of years for the Majors 50-70 league this past year, and 46-60 the year before.
And what do you find in terms of commissioner? How often issues come your way, and what are the issues maybe that a lot of parents don't know about?
To be honest, it's been relatively calm the last couple of years, which is a good sign. If there have been a few things come to my attention, it usually is about something to do, with a rule. I think that coaches sometimes get a little bit confused about the sit-down rule, which is important for our program, because it forces coaches to make sure that kids are not sitting on benches too long.
Right, and the rules are different at different ages. I assume that players can only play a certain amount, but players have to play a certain amount, and then there's always the pitch counts, which I would go crazy if I had to deal with pitch counts. But that's what is the most sort of difficult rule for coaches to have to keep an eye on? Is it the sit down? Is it pitch count?
No, I think the pitch counts are they should be pretty straightforward because you are supposed to keep track of the number of pitches between innings amongst the coaches. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to confirm the number of pitches with each side so that each coach and each side knows exactly how many pitches a pitcher has pitched. The biggest confusion is the sit-down rule. When you have kids, sometimes kids are arriving late to a game, for example.
Right.
So let's say you started out with 9 kids, and now all of a sudden, by the third inning, you've got 12 kids. How many of those kids are actually sitting during the game or playing during a game? You might have kids that need to make sure they sit down because they've been playing during the course of a game. So sometimes there can be confusion about that.
But is there a general rule? And again, it depends on the level. General rule: no player can play the whole game, or no?
Well, it completely depends on how many kids are attending a game. If you've got 9 kids, well, they're playing. Every kid is playing every inning.
Right.
But suddenly, if you start out with more than that, you're going to have at least one kid sit on the bench every inning. Now, obviously, a coach is not going to sit that same player the whole game.
Right.
That is not tolerated. So you have to shift players around. So according to how many players are present in each game, that forces you to have to. And my suggestion is to keep a chart so that it's clear for each coach who's actually sitting during innings and who's actually in the games. Mm-hmm. So that it's clear for the team and that it's fair. And we try to make sure that as commissioners for each division, that the coaches understand this is just about being fair to each player, and also giving certain players a chance to play.
Now, in all the years you've coached, what's been sort of the worst reaction you've gotten from a parent, without naming names or specifics?
Worst reaction, I would say
they've been pretty good.
I would say in general, what happens is you get a pretty intense game, maybe a very well played game, maybe a close score, and there might be a call or two that might even be just completely missed by the umpire.
Right.
And then you do get a very loud reaction, maybe from the crowd. Mm-hmm. There might be a word or two that shouldn't be said by a parent. Now, credit to the South Orange Maplewood parents. I have not seen this as much from our group as I've seen it from some of the other towns.
Yeah.
And so then you have to tell your players between innings or maybe before games or after games, this is what we don't tolerate. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes they could be the target of some of this talk.
Right.
And that's never good. I believe there was only one game where I felt like I should have taken my players off the field.
Really?
Not to forfeit the game, but just to take them off the field during the course of an argument.
Was this an interleague game here or a travel game?
This was a travel game. This was actually I believe it was a district Cal Ripken district game, where there was quite a commotion about a call that was made, and the take at least 10 minutes, I would say, arguing the call. Mm-hmm. And so my kids, being in the field, were standing around listening rather loud conversation go on. And I probably, in retrospect, I wish I had just taken them off the field and let them sit on the bench, have their drink. Mm. But I never anticipated for this argument to go on for so long.
And then now your sons are in a travel team, and my son's doing travel for the summer. How do you see the other teams' behavior and understanding, how's that changed? I mean, is there more parents who are trying to make their kids the next Mickey Mantle and overdoing it and getting too angry, or are parents on the travel levels starting to realize they have to keep it calm?
Well,
without
I wish I could
naming specifics, but
no, I wish I could say that we're trying to keep it calm, but that is, I'd probably have to say that the opposite is happening. I think that what we're getting a lot of parents who are really wanting their kids to become the next, Derek Jeter.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is that, most of these kids will not be the next Derek Jeter,
right,
and will be going on to do something else, hopefully very productive.
Mm-hmm.
But I think baseball can be used as a wonderful vehicle for many, many lessons, many positive lessons, and I think that that's the most important thing in all this, is that parents understand that this is a game and that we are trying to teach their kids how to play it well, and trying to enforce teamwork, respecting coaches, respecting the game, while absolutely trying to do their best. And if it means a victory, that is fantastic. If it means a loss, I would even say that there are many lessons learned in losing.
Oh, sure. You probably learn more from losing than from winning.
I think
cases.
so, and I think, in fact, one of our teams that maybe didn't have as favorable of a win-loss record, I remember saying to the committee at the end of the year when we were having our summary for the summer teams, I said, I think that this team probably learned more than any of our other teams because of those losses.
Right.
So that's what you want to hope happens. But of course, you will get a parent or two that has higher visions for their child, and maybe feel that you as a coach maybe didn't achieve as much as you should have for him or her, and that's unfortunate. But that does happen, and you have to understand that is part of the whole deal.
I think one of the things I've talked to you about is your approach. I always thought was you were pushing the kids very hard on the games and really pushing them to their full potential, but you never really crossed that line to overhype. And I think that's a tough thing to balance. How do you go about that? And how do you think coaches should go about that?
You know what? I really hate the word push. So
let's say
I'll say encourage.
Encourage, okay. But I'd say push in a good way.
Yeah, for me, the most important thing for me in these games, I would say probably maybe the thing that might have frustrated me in the past might be is if a kid didn't hustle.
Yeah.
Or if they gave up during a play, if they gave up, or mental mistakes where maybe they threw to the wrong base, or they weren't concentrating, and something happened as a result of something happened maybe as a result of not thinking ahead. And as these kids get older and as they play a higher brand of baseball, the game can be quick. And if they're not ready, mistakes can be made. And I think sometimes that can be the most frustrating thing, rather than the odd error that does happen.
Yeah.
Those are part of the game, or this odd strikeout, that sort of thing. That is part of the game, and that's not something that coaches should get upset at. But I do think that sometimes it can be frustrating if a kid, like I said, if a player gives up on a ball, or doesn't know what to do next with a ball, or doesn't know what to do while they're on the bases. Sometimes that can be, frustrating. But my whole thing is that I want them to be focused, and I want them to be ready, whether it's between plays, or whether it's in the dugout, or whether it's before a game. I want them to get ready. I want them to stretch. I want them to, work together as a team from the moment they arrive at the ball field. So, that's my whole thing is wanting them to work together, for the coaches to work together. I think that's really important that we as coaches, send the right message to these kids, being on time, or at least being at the ball field, with your best effort to be there with the rest of the team.
Excellent.
And, that's. And then at the end of the game, having a nice talk with the kids, making sure that they understood what they learned through the course of the game, and then getting ready for the next one. So, but all in all, for me, extremely positive experience with parents, with the players. I can't tell you how much for my boys it's been a positive experience for them to have baseball as a part of their lives.
Agreed, and I'll say that the same for our family. We're talking to Chris Nomura. He's a veteran youth coach, commissioner, dad, and Maplewood resident. But now let's switch hats for you a little. You are also a professional vocalist, opera singer, and now on Broadway. Tell us sort of what your day job has been for on stage and singing. How did that come about?
Well, I started very young. I started as a boy soprano in San Francisco, singing on the opera stages in San Francisco. So I had the benefit of singing with some of the greatest singers in the world as a young boy, starting at the age of 7.
And that's where you grew up, in San Francisco or in Oakland?
Yep, I grew up in San Francisco,
right.
Oakland Bay Area, and I had a performer's career from the very young age. And, it took me to all parts of the world. We traveled to parts of Europe and Asia, and even visited the White House. I sang for Gerald Ford.
Excellent. And how old were you then? I mean, this is...
I was 11.
You were a youth
12.
in the White House. It doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't happen very often. It's a huge honor, obviously. It was a tremendous experience.
Did you start... I mean, did you always have a notable voice as a child? Did your parents push you into it, or did you kind of find your way?
I know that my mother, who loved to sing, she never sang professionally, but she loved to sing, and she also played the piano and the church organ for the choir. So we always had music in the house.
Excellent.
And I played the piano as a young child, as did my 2 younger sisters. We all played some sort of instrument, whether it was the piano or the violin. For me, it was singing and the clarinet. So I had and piano. I had a lot of musical musical experience, but singing was something that was really, really special to me. I always loved to sing, and my mother, I think, seeing this, wanted me to experience it at a higher level than just singing with a phonograph in my living room. And so she encouraged me to audition for this group, the San Francisco Boys Chorus, which had about 200 boys in the group and very high achieving. We did a lot of things, from music theory to sight reading to ear training. We spent, in fact, instead of going to baseball camps or baseball travel teams, I spent my summers in basically a music camp. And so I spent every day working on ear training theory, singing, and that's kind of where that's where I found my niche as a singer. So it started early on, and then I pursued it through my studies in high school after my voice changed, and then I ended up going to a wonderful 5-year double degree program with Tufts University and New England Conservatory, which offers I got a political science as my liberal arts degree, and vocal performance as my music degree from New England Conservatory.
Wow.
So I had the best of both worlds. I was able to go to a wonderful liberal arts college, as well as experience incredible music at a world-renowned music conservatory in Boston.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And when did you get out of there? How long ago?
Well, oh my goodness, that was back. When did I graduate those programs?
Yeah.
Back in the late 80s, 87, 88, and then I was awarded a Fulbright scholarship to work in Europe, to study and singing in Europe, and I ended up working there for several years with one of the greatest German baritones of my time, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, who has now passed away.
Oh, my gosh.
But he was an incredible teacher, and I worked with several other world-class baritones. So I got a lot of training in Europe, and then I came back, won an incredible competition, an international competition called the Young Concert Artists International Competition, which kind of set me on my way. It provides an agency which helps find you work, and I got a lot of experience singing recitals, concert work, opera with this agency, and then I went on to professional management, and 20 years later, here I am.
So the last 20 years or so, you've basically been singing in different companies and in different performances, and
yes, American singers, professional singers.
Wow.
We're all freelancers, and so we go wherever work brings us. Whether it's the San Francisco Opera, whether it's San Francisco Symphony, or Boston Pops, or any even a chamber music concert. There might be music festivals like in Colorado, Aspen, Tanglewood. So you get signed up by these wonderful organizations to appear, and you sign your contract, and you go and you learn your piece. You make sure you're ready, and you do your show.
And this gave you a lot of flexibility to do the baseball coaching, but also do your singing, I would assume.
Yes, I was able to really determine my own schedule.
Excellent.
So
did you ever combine the two and sing a national anthem or anything at a game?
Oh, my goodness. Yes, national anthems were part of my hobby because I would find myself, for example, in Kansas City or Philadelphia or North Carolina with maybe a day off or 2 days off, and so they would sometimes schedule for me to sing at, for example, AT&T Park in San Francisco.
Oh, that's the hometown.
That's the hometown.
Oh,
so
very
that was
fun.
Very special. Or, for example, another highlight of my national anthem career was singing at Duke University for the Duke basketball team.
Oh, my God.
Coach K at Cameron Gym. So that was an incredible experience, and I actually was able to bring Will, when he was very small, onto center court to sing the national anthem. I have a wonderful picture of Coach K standing there with his hand on his heart, and me singing with Will in front of me. It was probably one of my most special moments. But so national anthems are part of my singing experience as well.
We have to get you at Yankee or Met game or some New Jersey minor league, which might even be beneath your level.
I love singing national anthems at minor league games. I've done a lot of them. I've done 17 ballparks.
Oh my gosh!
American and National League ballparks.
I don't think I've been to 17 ballparks, let alone singing at them. But now let's talk about the big news. Of course, you're going to be in the George Takei musical Allegiance, which will hit Broadway this fall. Now that's about sort of loosely based on his family's time at the internment camps during World War II, and I know from listening to him, he doesn't like the term Japanese internment camp because it wasn't the Japanese, it was the Americans forcing Japanese Americans into the camps. And of course, you're of Japanese descent. What is your family's background in terms of coming to this country?
Well, my mother and father arrived into California. Actually, initially Los Angeles in the 60s.
So they were post-World War II. They didn't
post-World War II. However, my parents were old enough to experience the unfortunate, wartime experiences as young children.
Oh my
God! But they were living in Japan, and my mother and father remembered well those days of bombs being dropped on their homes.
Oh my God!
Things like that. It's not. They weren't pleasant memories, unfortunately. However, that did not deter them or discourage them from coming to this country. They were Christians, and so they actually met as Christians in Japan, which, as you can understand, is very rare. When only 1%, I believe, of the country is actually Christian.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they came to America because they felt that they could practice their religion more freely, and both my parents loved America. They loved the United States, and so my father came as a young student at Cal Berkeley as an architect student. And my mother, who loved education, wanted to work with young children as a teacher. And so she started a business out of our home as a preschool care facility. and then my father started to buy property in the mid to late 60s and 70s and started to put together a wonderful school for children from pre-K all the way through middle high school.
Excellent. Now, they still have some business out there, correct?
Yes.
That you run in those worlds?
Yes, we have a preschool called the Nomura Preschool, which still is running very well, I might add.
Is that in San Francisco?
It's actually in California, in the East Bay.
Excellent.
And it's a wonderful business. Has over 100 kids in the preschool. And the other campuses that my father and mother owned and ran schools are now being leased to other schools who are using them for their own programs.
Great. Now, tell us about Allegiance, how you got involved, and what the story is about, and the part you're going to play.
Sure. My introduction to Allegiance actually came through a friend of mine who I performed with 17 years ago in Oregon. We were doing a Deflator Mouse, which is an opera, and he called me kind of out of the blue and wanted to know if I would be interested to audition for this part, which became available because the gentleman who played this role had just been signed up to sing in the King and I production in New York. And so he actually left the production. They had done 7 weeks in San Diego, a very successful run at the Old Globe Theater, broke all the attendance records, box office records, during that 7-week period. And I was sort of caught unaware of this piece, Allegiance, and I looked into it, and it was intriguing, to say the least, because of the subject matter, but also because of George Takei's involvement, Lea Salonga, who is an incredible singer, as well as some other members of the cast. And so when I was asked to audition for it, I was very excited to be standing in front of the producers and the directors and the composers of this piece.
And the part you're going to be involved is what?
The part that I'm playing will be George Takei's father when he was in the camp.
Right.
And so George Takei, the real story, the real life story of George Takei is he was actually in this camp when he was, I believe, 5 years old to about 9.
Wow.
However, in this made-for-Broadway version, I believe he's a little bit older. Even, I believe he's a teenager, maybe in his late teens, experiencing some of the other things that some of the folks had to deal with. For example, the question of whether they were going to go to war for the USA or not. And you can imagine
the Japanese Americans at the time being interred, and then maybe saying, "Hey, we're not going to just keep you in these prisons," which is really what they were. You're going to go fight for the U.S.
Correct.
Yeah. And how does that generally work for most of the Japanese Americans?
I think that's kind of the crux of the matter here with this show, is that it in some cases it divided families.
Wow.
In some cases it brought them together because obviously you lose a son. Not only do you lose your home or you lose your community, and you're thrown into this horrible situation, but now you're losing a son into the war and possibly having them face a horrible end there too. But I think that what this show brings is the human element of what these people went through. And it's from what I've been able to gather, from looking at the score, from looking at the script, it's a wonderful show, which brings together a very dramatic and personal and emotional element to this experience, this rather unfortunate situation.
And it's going to be at the Longacre Theater. The first shows are going to be in October. You can go online now and order ahead and find out information about it. And we're going to look forward to seeing that show come out and Chris being a big part of it. And, of course, continuing with your overseeing of baseball, and I know you still are active in the community. I know you show up at games to see how your players, my son among them, are doing, and it's a great tribute to I think the work you do in Maplewood, both on the field and as a performer. And I appreciate your spending some time with us.
Well, thank you. I hope people can come out and see the show. It's going to be, from what I understand, it's going to be very successful, and hopefully it has a nice, long, healthy run.
Now, how much are you locked in, or?
Well, we all sign basically a year commitment.
Wow.
The opening night. Previews are going to start beginning of October, and opening performances will start November.
Oh, so it's actually November with the previews in October. Okay.
Previews in October, right. I believe it's November 8th, which is opening night. George Takei's incredible following of fans, I believe, have already purchased a number of thousands of tickets.
Excellent.
So that's wonderful. But I think the show has an incredible group of people tremendously dedicated to this cause. Not just a show, but really it's a cause. I think it will also be encouraged for students to come and see the show. So their hope is that it will do well enough to maybe have a Tony presence in June of 2016. So the hope is that it's going to have a real presence on Broadway. And I think this is an important story for people to hear and watch and hopefully enjoy. And from what all indications are from the San Diego response is that it's just a very heartwarming, very illuminating experience for the audience. So, and I'm looking forward to it. I cannot wait to work with Mr. Takei and Ms. Salonga and the rest of the crew. It's going to be an incredible experience. I'm looking forward to it so much.
Well, so are we. We'll be there, and we'll keep up to date. Let people know when the shows are beginning and any other updates, and also look for you on the ball field here in between.
Great. Thanks
a lot, Chris. Be well.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot, Joe.